The weekend will conclude with information from 9 different CDL teams for next week. So as Rostermania goes on, who are we feeling more confident about and who are we still left with question marks? That and more coming right up. COD fans, good to see you guys. I will be the first one to admit that I am exhausted. It's been a very long weekend. Been doing a bunch of stuff with Apex Legends and all that stuff, but you got to go back to COD. That's where it is at the heart. That's what we're going to be doing here today. We've got information on 9 different teams, and of course, the biggest news circling around Hecz in his move to NRG as the co-CEO. We'll talk about that more in reference to the COD team that we anticipate him affiliating with and what that means for that city as we go through. Now, again, I will remind you guys that here we take a lot of things under our pride, production value, responsibility, and the sort, and in the spirit of both of those things, I have kind of partnered up a little bit more with the CDL Intel account with Crone, as he's going to be helping provide me with more of a confidence index as far as all the information he posts, what is actually looking pretty solid and what might not have as much information, or at least as much confidence in when it comes to things that you might be hearing around the community. So as far as responsible sources, hopefully I can win your trust over when it comes to that. I'm going to start with my least confident moves that we know of so far, and then kind of progress to things that we know 100% are happening. Starting off with a team that we have not heard much about when it comes down to roster moves, but of course we trust the CEO that's there, or at least the guy who's running it in Hastro. We're looking at Dallas. Now, again, we haven't said much about the squad because there hasn't been much to be talked about. There have been a handful of whispers. The biggest thing with all of the Envy moves that have been going on was that we first got the instance that, hey, Hecz, after his loan to Splice, is back and has not taken Envy out of his account anywhere. So that was kind of an insinuation that with everybody else from Envy being moved away, Hecz not being moved, that it was going to be a team kind of centered around Hecz. That seems to be a little bit more likely, as here are the 5 players that we're hearing about with not that much confidence, but this is the at least initial take on what Dallas might look like. We're looking at the possibility of Crimsix with Clayster, Hecz, and Illy and Shotzi, who will be 18 by the time that the CDL starts up. That is quite a roster just to take at face value. I mean, again, this Dallas team, we don't know 100% that's going to be the case. We figured that the likelihood of Hecz being in Dallas is very likely. It's just going to come down to what will that team look like built around it. Now, there is a little bit of controversy surrounding Dallas because when Hastro had talked about this franchise in specific, he was saying that players will have to move to Dallas and live in a team house and things like that. Who knows if that's still true, but the other thing is the simple fact that Illy and Shotzi are 2 brand new players when it comes to the professional scene. Now, granted, both of these guys have had very impressive performances in amateur scenes all across every different realm of Call of Duty over the last handful of years, but there is still that level of having to prepare and be in, or at least surrounded by experience to where you can grow into the CDL. I could think of no 2 better people than Crimsix, who's out looking for a little bit of maybe revenge and kind of looking more motivated than ever after what had happened with the whole OpTic drama. And then Clayster, who's coming off a world championship with arguably some of the best experience that you have in the Call of Duty world, period. This is looking like a really awesome team. My biggest thing will be now who's going to be the person to rein this squad in and be their coach. We don't know much about that. Not really much about coaches as a whole, but this Dallas squad. All of this roster, though, for Dallas, we're only throwing a 50% confidence on, so take from that what you will. Again, I'm looking at Hecz to be the centerpiece for this roster, and then whatever else happens around him, happens around him. Transitioning to LA, talking about the OpTic Immortal spot, not so much the CoD Esports team that we've heard very little about, actually nothing about. It's still looking like TJ and Dashy will be here, but it has been a little bit of a change. Initially, we were thinking maybe Scump would be in the mix for this squad. That's looking a little bit less likely with Hecz assigning himself to another team, and it looks like there very well could be Slasher and Kenny who get assigned here. The 5th is not 100% known. We've been going back and forth from hearing that JCap is going to be there. Never mind, no he's not, to right back to maybe he very well might be there again. So we're not going to list him down there. We're still not really sure. There have been some whispers saying that JCap very well could be the 5th, but we're looking at a 60% confidence meter that it should be TJ, Dashy, Slasher, and Kenny in some fashion. This is a downgrade though, as it was 70% the last time we reported on it, down to just 60% now. Going a little bit in more dramatic fashion is the Seattle spot, which, again, there have been a handful of announcements regarding this. It looks like Slacked will be assimilated to Seattle. That was still the same. Octane and Enable as well, still listed as being the potential for Seattle, but the roster has changed up a little bit, as we're thinking maybe Karma, maybe Apathy as the 4th or the 5th. This was a roster at one point in time we said 70%, but we weren't sure because Seattle at that point in time hadn't been announced. In my most recent video talking about the 3 new city franchises, with Seattle being confirmed, it went up to 85%. We're swinging this back down to a 60% confidence meter, simply due to the fact that we don't know 100% what's going to be happening, but it is looking a little bit more likely that Slacked will for sure be there. It just comes down to what happens with the rest of the team around him. And then we get to the big news here. Again, Hecz has announced that he will be joining with NRG, which will mean that he will not only be the co-CEO, but he will have a lot of influence of what happens in Chicago. NRG, most recently having been one of the last 3 teams that we had announced about the CDL, had surprisingly not affiliated with San Francisco and are going with Chicago instead. So that's exciting not only for me as the very clear Chicago fan in the room, but beyond that, the fact that Hecz is assimilated to this org means that there's going to be a lot of potential things that'll happen. There were a handful of rumors about potential rosters that might be assimilated with either OpTic in LA or Seattle. That has kind of conglomerated into the potential what's going to be happening in Chicago. So outside of Hecz, who made this announcement earlier today talking about joining the Chicago CEO, we also have news about what roster might be coming up.
You're stuck on every single adventure that I go on. You're stuck on every single project that I'm gonna be a part of. And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
So getting to that roster, what it looks like, Scump is almost I would say a for sure guarantee that he'll be in Chicago, but we're looking at the potential of Formal, again T2P possibly coming back together, as there's been a lot of rumors about that floating around. That's looking relatively likely. And then the last 3 a little bit more up in the air, but it's looking like it very well could be Gunless, Arcides, or Envoy. 60% confidence to this announcement, simply due to the fact that we don't know 100% what might happen with that full 5, but it's looking like a good core of those 5 will indeed be in Chicago, specifically Scump and Formal looking more and more likely by the day. So very excited to see what will come of the Chicago roster now that Hecz has joined NRG, and will I'm sure have a lot of hands-on when it comes down to what happens with that Call of Duty roster. Now as we break forward, we're looking at essentially calls that are looking almost essentially guaranteed without confirmations yet. We hadn't heard much about what's going on in Minnesota. That has changed recently, as we're looking at an 80% confirmation when it comes down to the team of 3 that I'm about to announce, which will be Silly, Assault, and God RX. A lot of diversity there and a lot of familiarity between a lot of those players, but it comes down to what that 4th and 5th are going to be. That team of 3 looking very likely for Minnesota. The potential for a 4th or a 5th, there's been conversation of maybe Hecz, maybe Decimates in the mix of there, but we're not 100% sure as far as what the other prospects of that squad are looking like. But for that team of 3, we're looking like an 80% confidence rating there. We also reported in one of our previous videos about Florida as far as how they have kind of been throwing around a bunch of names, but since then, and that 40% confidence that we gave last time around, we're starting to narrow down what at least a core 3 in Florida will look like. It's looking like Mox, Skies, and Frosty will for sure be there in some fashion. It just comes down to what will be there for our 4th or 5th. There are some whispers about Pristini, who was initially announced, or at least initially leaked, as potentially being involved with that roster, but also John has been playing a lot of Modern Warfare with Mox, Skies, and Frosty. Read into that what you will. We're boosting this up to an 80% confidence meter, though, on that team of 3 of Mox, Skies, and Frosty. So again, that is looking pretty likely as far as the core 3 in Florida. Over to New York. This was a roster that we announced before with only about a 60% certainty. It's looking a lot more likely this time around as far as that set 5, up to a 90% confidence meter that we're going to be looking at the likes of Accuracy, Attach, Zuma, Zero, and Temp in the Big Apple. Pretty exciting and honestly pretty terrifying roster up there with Revan. That's going to be, again, a team that you look at that roster, and Revan, he knows what he wants out of his team when it comes to him as a coach specifically, and that's a team that you can definitely see him getting behind full force, and one that you can see him leading to potentially be a major contender, if not a potential champion in our first season. Atlanta also, we had initially put it at 95%. It's looking like all we're waiting for is a full confirmation. Crone was pretty passionate about saying that he was 100% sure this was going to happen, so go ahead and say hello to Atlanta if it does end up coming through. In Simp, Abizi, Major Maniac, Priesta, and Celium. Again, all we're waiting for out of that one is a confirmation, as he's pretty sure that all those players have signed contracts with Atlanta. So that's what we're looking for when it comes to Atlanta. And then, of course, the only official announcements that have happened so far today actually have happened with London, where we're getting a full coaching staff plus what will likely be at least a team of 2 out of some of their potential roster. Starting things off, Joe will be the head coach. Assistant coach will be JB, and the strategic coach will be Shane. All of them coming with a lot of that background, or that back end, I guess, side when it comes to coaching between the 3 of them, especially most recently. So very excited to see what London's able to do with those announcements. Then, of course, as far as the roster is concerned, of course, we're looking at what will now be not a team of 3, but a team of 2 of Scraps and Dylan. Essentially about 100% confirmation behind that. No announcements, but we're pretty sure the rosters have, or pardon me, the contracts have been signed. The only big kind of question mark with that initial team of 3 is that tweet between Scraps and Wuskin of them not teaming together actually a thing, or is it a little bit of bait? It's looking more like it's very much so real, but we're not going to officially assign that, so Wuskin might still be a consideration. But for now, Scraps and Dylan looking very likely to go to London. A little bit short of a recap for you guys, just to get you guys going as far as RosterMania news, and of course the big news with Hecz going to NRG. I'm interested though in the comments below, if you're an OpTic fan or a Hecz fan, will you just immediately drop the OpTic wagon to go over to NRG now that Hecz is there, or is it going to be based off individual players? Because obviously we're looking at Crim6 and TJ and Dashy and Karma and Scump not necessarily being together next year, maybe at all. Is that going to be what pulls you? I'm just kind of curious, so go ahead and get in the comment section below, let me know. Otherwise, we'll be doing more recaps and stuff like this, so if you're new to the channel, it's good to have you. Make sure you subscribe, ring that notification bell to know when these videos do come up, and hopefully we've earned some of your trust when it comes down to being the most responsible source of RosterMania information for Call of Duty. And until the next video, hopefully we'll catch you then. Until then, though, hope you keep pulling it down. Later. Bye-bye.